Not you. The entire conference room went dead silent after my boss said it. 20 people sitting around that table, quarterly bonus meeting, and somehow every single eye locked onto me at once. I actually thought he was joking. I laughed for half a second and said, "Wait, what?" Derek didn't even blink. He just straightened his tie, looked down at the paperwork in front of him, and said, "Bonuses are for employees who show loyalty to this company." That's when my stomach dropped, because I was the one who landed the biggest client in company history. The same client Derek had been bragging about for months. A couple people looked uncomfortable. One coworker quietly muttered, "Don't do this here." And then HR suddenly cut in with, "Maybe we should continue this discussion privately." That was the moment I realized something was very, very wrong. So I reached into my bag, pulled out a printed stack of emails, and Derek's face instantly changed. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Derek's face instantly changed. Not angry, not confused, panicked. It lasted maybe 1 second before he forced that corporate smile back on. But I saw it. And judging by the way Melissa from HR suddenly stopped talking, she saw it too. "Becca," Derek said carefully, leaning back at the head of the conference table, "I think you're taking this personally." A few people shifted awkwardly in their chairs. Taking it personally? He had just denied me a bonus in front of the entire department after spending 6 straight months calling me the reason our region hit record numbers. I looked around the room. Half the team wouldn't meet my eyes. The other half looked terrified to even breathe. That's when something clicked. This wasn't spontaneous. Whatever this was, Derek had planned it. I slowly pulled one email free from the stack and placed it on the conference table between us. "You sent this to me 3 weeks ago," I said. "You literally wrote, 'Your performance bonus has already been approved internally.'" Derek glanced at the paper but didn't touch it. "That email was discussing projected allocations," he replied immediately. Too immediately. I felt my heartbeat pounding in my throat now, because up until that moment, a small part of me still thought there had to be some mistake. Payroll issue. Budget freeze. Something explainable. But Derek wasn't acting like a man correcting an error. He was acting like a man trying to contain damage. Melissa finally stood up from her seat near the wall. "Okay," she said quickly, forcing a tight smile. "I think we should wrap this up and continue privately." Nobody moved. Not one person. Even the newer hires sitting near the back looked frozen. And honestly, that silence told me more than anything Derek had said. Because people weren't shocked that I got denied. They were shocked I was fighting back. I stared at Derek and said, "Can you at least explain what lack of loyalty means?" His jaw tightened. "You've been difficult lately." I almost laughed again. Difficult. For asking why my commission reports suddenly changed. For asking why I'd been removed from leadership calls I used to run every Monday. For asking why payroll stopped answering my emails 2 months ago. Derek folded his hands together like he was trying to stay calm for the room. "This isn't the place for this conversation." But this was the place to humiliate me? I shot back. That landed harder than I expected. I saw Nina, one of the account managers across the table, immediately look down at her notebook. Another coworker rubbed his forehead like he wanted to disappear. Derek's voice dropped lower. Sharper. Careful. "Becca." There it was. Not denial. Not clarification. A warning. The craziest part? 3 days earlier, I probably would have backed down. Derek had been my mentor since the day he recruited me into the company. He used to call me his secret weapon. He was the one who pushed for my promotion, the one who told executives I was leadership material. But over the last 2 months, Something changed. Meetings I was supposed to attend suddenly got rescheduled. Client access permissions disappeared without explanation. Numbers on my sales reports stopped matching my actual accounts. And every single time I asked about it, Derek told me not to worry. Then Nina warned me in the break room 2 nights earlier. "Check your payroll records," she whispered. "Something's off." At the time, I thought she meant accounting made a mistake. Now I realized she'd been trying to warn me. I picked up the final document from the folder, and the second Derek saw the company payroll header at the top of the page, the color drained out of his face. Derek pushed his chair back so fast it scraped across the conference room floor. "This meeting is over," he said. But nobody stood up. That was the first moment I realized the room had stopped seeing him as the person in control. The projector still displayed the giant sales chart behind him, record quarter in bold blue letters, and the irony of it almost made me sick. My accounts were responsible for nearly 40% of that number, and somehow I was the only person being denied a bonus. I kept the payroll document in my hand, but didn't show it yet. "Not fully." Derek pointed toward the door. "Everyone back to work." Now, still, nobody moved. Melissa looked like she wanted to disappear into the carpet. I could feel my hands shaking, but at that point, embarrassment had already turned into anger, the kind that makes your voice calmer instead of louder. "You told me my bonus was approved," I said. "So what changed?" Derek exhaled slowly through his nose. "Compensation decisions are based on multiple factors. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." A few people exchanged glances, because everyone in that room knew how hard I worked. They'd watched Derek dump failing accounts onto my desk for 3 years straight. They watched me stay in the office past midnight before major renewals while he went home and took credit for department leadership on executive calls. And until recently, I let him, because I trusted him. That was the part making this feel personal. 3 years earlier, Derek had recruited me himself from another firm. He took me to lunch my first week and told me, "You help me grow this department, and I'll make sure your career takes off." At the time, I believed him. But over the last couple months, little things stopped making sense. My commission summaries started changing after submission. Leadership meetings disappeared from my calendar, and every time I questioned payroll delays, HR suddenly stopped responding. Then Nina's warning replayed in my head again. Derek's nervous about something. I looked directly at him and finally slid the payroll sheet onto the conference table. "You want to explain?" I asked quietly, "why my bonus was transferred before this meeting even started?" Melissa's eyes widened instantly, and Derek leaned forward just enough to whisper, "You shouldn't have accessed those files." The second Derek said that, the entire room changed, not confused anymore. Alert. Because innocent people don't say things like "you shouldn't have accessed those files." Innocent people say there's been a mistake. A guy from the marketing team near the back frowned and said, "Wait, transferred to who?" Derek snapped his head toward him. "That's confidential." I could actually see the panic starting to crack through his calm executive act now. Melissa stepped in quickly. Becca was never authorized to view internal payroll routing. There it was. Not denial again, just blame. I looked at her. I didn't hack anything. Payroll accidentally gave me temporary admin access during the software migration last week. Nobody interrupted me now. I was trying to figure out why my commission totals kept changing, I continued. And when I checked the bonus approvals, I paused, looking directly at Derek. I found out mine had already been signed off weeks ago. A couple people shifted in their seats. One of the account reps actually whispered, "What?" I pulled another page from the folder and held it up. "The bonus wasn't canceled," I said. "It was reassigned." Derek immediately stood up. "Okay, we're done here." But this time his voice sounded shaky. I didn't sit down. You moved it into something called an executive retention allocation. That phrase hit the room like a brick because nobody knew what it meant, but everyone understood it sounded bad. Derek pointed at me across the table. You are wildly misrepresenting internal accounting procedures. Then explain them. Silence. Real silence, not awkward silence. Dangerous silence. And then something happened Derek definitely wasn't expecting. Nina spoke up, quietly at first. My commission was delayed too. Derek turned toward her so fast she flinched. Another employee near the windows added, mine was short last quarter. Then another voice, payroll, told me there was a processing issue. Melissa looked physically ill now. I realized this was bigger than me. Way bigger. Derek straightened his jacket, trying to pull himself back together. None of you understand how executive compensation structures work. I stared at him for a second before saying the one thing that finally wiped the confidence off his face completely. Actually, I said, reaching for my phone, I spoke to corporate compliance yesterday. The blood drained out of Derek's face. And for the first time since this meeting started, he looked scared. Nobody said a word. The air in that conference room felt heavy enough to choke on. Derek stared at me from the head of the table, completely still now, like he was recalculating everything in real time. Then he asked quietly, who did you talk to? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I unlocked my phone and placed it face up on the conference table between us. The email thread was still open. Corporate Compliance Division. Marked received at 11:43 p.m. the night before. I watched Derek's eyes lock onto the screen. That tiny flicker of panic came back immediately. I started asking questions after my commission reports changed, I said. Then payroll accidentally gave me admin visibility during the system update, and once I saw the bonus transfers, I shook my head. None of the numbers matched the reports being sent to corporate. Melissa closed her eyes for a second. That told me almost everything. I looked at her. You knew. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Derek said it was temporary. The room erupted, not yelling, worse, people talking over each other in disbelief. What does that mean? Temporary how? You knew bonuses were missing? Derek slammed his palm against the table. Enough. Everybody went quiet again. But now they were afraid of him in a completely different way. Not because he was powerful. Because they realized he'd been lying to all of us. Derek pointed at me. You have no idea how corporate budgeting works. I laughed once, short and sharp. No, I understand it perfectly now. I opened the final document in the folder. Executive compensation summaries, internal payout adjustments, transfer authorizations, all signed locally, all connected directly back to Derek. You weren't protecting the department, I said. You were moving employee bonuses into executive performance numbers. A guy near the back muttered, oh my God. Derek's composure finally cracked. You think you're helping these people? He snapped. Without me, this department collapses. But nobody looked convinced anymore. Not after months of delayed payouts, not after seeing the paperwork, not after hearing Melissa admit she knew. Several employees had their phones out now, recording everything. And then I slid the final page across the table toward Derek. The one document I hadn't shown yet. Tell them, I said calmly, where the money actually went. Derek looked down at the paper, and for the first time in the 3 years I'd known him, he had absolutely nothing to say. Derek just stared at the paper. His mouth opened slightly like he was about to argue, but nothing came out. Because the document in front of him wasn't another payroll adjustment or accounting spreadsheet. It was a breakdown of executive incentive payouts. His payouts. I looked around the room before finally saying it out loud. He didn't redirect our bonuses to protect the company, I said. He redirected them to inflate regional profit numbers. Nobody interrupted me now. Every person in that conference room was listening. The higher the reported margins looked, I continued, the bigger the executive performance incentives became. That's how Derek qualified for his retention package last quarter. Nina frowned. Wait, you got paid off our bonuses? Derek finally snapped back to life. That's not how this works. But his voice sounded weaker now, desperate. I slid another page across the table. This is your compensation approval from corporate, I said. 6-figure incentive payout tied directly to regional profitability metrics. Melissa covered her mouth with her hand. Because now the entire room understood the real reason I'd been singled out publicly. I hadn't been denied my bonus because I lacked loyalty. I'd been denied because I found the transfers, and Derek needed to discredit me before I started asking questions in front of everyone else. You tried to embarrass me into staying quiet, I said. Derek looked furious now. You accessed confidential financial records, and you stole employee compensation. That landed hard. One of the newer reps actually pushed his chair back from the table like he physically needed distance from Derek. The room had completely turned. A month earlier, Derek walked through that office like he owned the building. People laughed at his jokes. Executives praised him on conference calls. Half the department was scared to disagree with him. Now nobody would even look at him. He looked around the room like he was searching for someone to back him up. Nobody did. Then he looked at me and said, "Quieter this time, you just destroyed this department." I shook my head. "No," I said. "You did." Silence again. But this time it felt different. Not tense. Final. Then my phone buzzed against the conference table. Corporate compliance. Right on schedule. I picked it up, listened for maybe 10 seconds, then said, "Understood." Derek's face lost what little color it had left. "They're downstairs," I said. Melissa started crying quietly. About 20 minutes later, 2 corporate investigators and a legal representative walked into the office. Nobody even pretended to work anymore. The entire floor knew something serious had happened. Derek tried to leave his office once they arrived, but security stopped him near the elevators. Watching that happen didn't feel satisfying the way I thought it would. Mostly it felt exhausting. Like my body had finally caught up to the last 2 months of stress all at once. Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled fast. Corporate audits confirmed the transfers. Multiple employees received corrected bonus payouts and back commissions. Melissa cooperated fully with investigators after being suspended. And Derek? He lost everything. His position, his incentive package, his reputation inside the company. Turns out corporate leadership had no idea local payroll records were being manipulated before submission. The craziest part was how many people later admitted they suspected something was wrong, but were too afraid to say anything first. That's what power like Derek's does. It makes everybody wait for someone else to speak. A few weeks later, corporate offered me a position on a different leadership team. Better pay. Better oversight. No Derek. On my last day in that office, I carried one small box past the conference room where everything happened. Nina stopped me near the exit and said, "You know you're the only reason any of this came out, right?" I looked back toward Derek's old office. His name had already been removed from the glass door. And honestly, the moment he said "not you" in front of everyone, he thought I'd stay embarrassed and quiet. That was his mistake.